And before we begin, I'd like to first ground us in this space, and I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are here in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. We are all treaty people. The Alzheimer Society of Nova Scotia takes responsibility for our role in reconciliation. We are working to implement the calls to action made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Furthermore, we recognize the people of African descent who have been in Nova Scotia for more than 400 years, and the 52 Nova Scotian African communities in our province. We also recognize the Acadians who lived in harmony with the Mi'kmaq and whose communities across the province are a living testament to the fortitude of their ancestors who survived the Grand Dérangement. The Alzheimer Society of Nova Scotia is committed to undertaking the work to create collaborative and respectful communication and relationships. Welcome. Together, our goal is to identify and develop tools that align with the beliefs and needs of Indigenous, African Nova Scotian, Acadian, and all equity-seeking groups. We're committed to walk as community partners and allies in the elimination of racism and discrimination for healthcare and across society. Welcome to those who just joined us. I'd like to now take a moment to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, Lyle. I'd like you to ask, we'd like to have a really warm welcome to our special guest, a Nova Scotian welcome, who reached out to offer this session. He's traveled all the way from British Columbia. Lyle is the author of the Alzheimer's Family Manual and the co-author of the Montessori Alzheimer's Project. In 1985, his father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at the age of 54. And while supporting his parents through his father's 15-year journey, he began writing down what he might say to help others on their own journey. He served as a director of the Santa Barbara Alzheimer's Association, focusing on caregiver support, where he started their first caregiver support group for adult children of people with Alzheimer's. Later, Lyle brought together the Montessori educational method as practiced by Riza, his wife, in the school community she founded in Vancouver, with the Montessori insights of Greg McDonald, a renowned Montessori trainer. He helped refine the approach to benefit both individuals with dementia and their caregivers. The purpose of the Montessori Alzheimer's Project and the work Lyle does is to clarify that there is a path of kindness and warmth that can be walked by people with dementia and their caregivers together. So heartfelt thanks for joining us. I'll hand it over to you, Lyle.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who know me, I tend to laugh a lot when I talk, so here I am. It's really nice to see you all. I'm very happy to be here, and very happy that you could be here as well. So we're going to talk tonight about the power of prepared environment, which is a Montessori concept, where basically you're preparing the environment to work with the developmental stage of the child or the adult that you're working with. But I do want to say a couple of things at the beginning. First, there will be a Q&A at the end. If there are other questions after the Q&A is over that you wish to talk to me about, I'm happy to stay as long as needed. So, we're talking about the power of a prepared environment. And tonight, this environment has been established through the most positive intention and kindness of the Nova Scotia Alzheimer's Society. And people should understand that their work is on behalf of everyone who has dementia and all their caregivers. And it's a nexus where it's a resource that's accessible to everybody in need. So I urge you to always remember that this is a resource that all of you can tap into. They do this work, they're all connected with people who have Alzheimer's, so there's a heart connection that can be made very quickly and very easily and will be very, very beneficial. People who deal with Alzheimer's have all kinds of insights because of their direct experience, and you can share in that. Okay, so let's see. Next. I do this work with caregivers because of these people, my mother and my father. My father had been diagnosed about 8 years at the time of this picture, and my mother hated this picture, because in her words, you can't tell who's sick. Laughter, best medicine. And I love this picture because despite the fact that he's been ill for 8 years, you can see the affection. And that's the fundamental ground we're talking about, the affection you have for this person you love. So, my father, as was said, was diagnosed with early onset. He lived for 15 years, and when he passed away just because of Alzheimer's. There was no intervening cancer or stroke or heart attack. So I had a front row seat from the very beginning to the very end. After the next slide. After a very difficult visit, my father was having a very difficult time, I came home and I sat down and I thought to myself, what would I do if someone called me and said, Lyle, I know your father is not well. I just found out that my spouse, friend, aunt and uncle, whoever it might be, also has this. What would I say to them? And it's not that I have some incredible insight that I know how to do everything and everything will be fine if you just talk to me, but rather what I felt was that I knew some of the landmines. And if I could help someone avoid some of the obstacles, that would be a kind thing to do, it would be a beneficial thing to do. So that was the essence of why I started doing this. So the first thing I did was an audio tape, which is the first 2/3 of the book on the left, the Alzheimer's Family Manual. And I did it as an audio tape at the beginning because caregivers don't necessarily have a lot of time to sit in a quiet corner and read a book. So basically it turned out that people were very happy to put an audio tape. I'm dating myself, right? I'm really old. People put audio tapes in a car. What am I thinking? But it was very easy for them to listen as they were driving. And it seemed to be very helpful, so I continued to do these kinds of things. So I did serve, as was said, on the board of the Santa Barbara Alzheimer's Association for a number of years. And while many other people were focused on research and funding for research, which was definitely going to benefit people in the future, my concern was, how do we benefit people right now? For example, like my mother, like my father. The research which may come to pass and be beneficial in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years is very, very important. But in my own kind of greedy state of mind, what could I do to help someone right now? So that's what I started doing. In my normal life, I was a lawyer. This was a little bit different. But the idea of trying to use clarity and empathy, what could be accomplished? So my wife, as was said, founded a Montessori school community. She's very well aware of what was going on with my family all those years. And in talking with her about the Montessori pedagogy, this method of education, it was very clear that a lot of the things would be very, very helpful and a better way to frame it for people to be able to use and access. So with that in mind, we'll talk a little bit more about Montessori and prepared environments. And the idea is that fundamentally, when someone has Alzheimer's, someone has some kind of dementia, life is a huge obstacle. It's always a test. Do I remember this? Can I do this? Does someone see how ill I might be? If you create a prepared environment properly, you eliminate most of those issues. If you eliminate most of those issues, you eliminate most of the fear. You eliminate, or at least diminish, many of the obstacles. So, most people associate Montessori education with little kids, because that's what she originally did, Maria Montessori. And that little kid is my daughter, sitting on my father's lap, and she gave me permission to use the picture on that book. And that book, which is the basis for what I'm going to be speaking about tonight, is the actual application of Montessori and prepared environments to dementia care, primarily focused on home care. If you can keep someone at home safely, with dignity, with positive support for the caregiver as well, there's tremendous benefit. Okay, so how does little kids' education relate to dementia care? Well, very important to understand that I'm not saying that someone with dementia is a child or like a child. It's not that at all. But if you think about how a child connects to the world, you're teaching them what to pull out of the world, what perception to pull out of the world to work with. It's very simple. So you have all these little materials in Montessori, and the child is trained to work with this one, and they learn, and you extend and extend. With dementia, can you create an environment which supports their living? Okay? Their capacities are changing. They may not be able to do what they did a week ago or a month ago or a year ago. So how do you modify the environment so you're supporting their life as it is now? Because their environment is changing, one of the things that's very important to understand is that we have the idea that we share the environment with the people we care for. And in some way we do. But because we operate primarily on our accessible memories, concepts that we're used to dealing with, habits that have always worked for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, we assume that they are in the same situation, and they're not anymore. So you have to meet them where they are. Just like in the Montessori classroom, you meet the child where the child is. So that's kind of the connection there. So the first thing you need to do, from a Montessori point of view, is observe. Observation is key. When I say observation, we suggest you maintain a journal. Why maintain a journal? It's because as we go through our day, we don't necessarily remember everything that happens when. But if you maintain a journal, you are creating a resource for yourself as a primary caregiver and for any respite caregiver that may come. You will learn all kinds of things which will make your life easier. Okay, so what does that mean, make your life easier? How does it make your life easier? If you take a journal for even a few days, and in your journal you say, okay, at 8 in the morning, I gave this person that I love a cup of coffee. At 8:20, they had an accident, a toileting accident. That happens 2, 3, 4 days in a row. You understand that when you give them something to drink, in about 20 minutes, their body is going to need to use a washroom. What happens is they may not remember the signals that their body is giving them that it's time to use the washroom. But with a journal, you can look at the clock, and 15 minutes after they finish their drink of coffee, you can walk them down towards the washroom. Very simple. Little things like that. If you can avoid little accidents like that, it makes your life as a caregiver much better. It makes the life of the person you care about much easier. Living with dignity is actually a very kind thing to do. If you see them getting upset, either at a particular time or over a particular kind of incidents, you keep that in the journal. And you start to learn what might be triggering. If you know what triggers them, you can start to take steps before that happens so that they don't get triggered. And when you have a respite caregiver, you have a resource for them to look at so that even though they're not the primary caregiver, they're not there every day, they know the basic ideas that need to be taken care of, the basic things that need to be implemented, which can allow you to relax more in having somebody provide respite care. So, the fundamental goal is you want the experience of safety to be communicated. When someone's having a panic attack, and you tell them, no, don't panic, you're safe, it does nothing. Someone in a panic attack needs to be given the experience of safety. So how do you communicate the experience of safety? So we will talk about that a little later on in how to communicate. But fundamentally, we're talking about physical safety, which is how we may manipulate the environment to benefit and keep everybody safe. And later, we'll talk about the communication environment. So safety is the key. If they feel safe, you avoid catastrophic reactions. You avoid panic attacks. And for everyone that you avoid, your life is that much easier, and the person you love's life is that much easier. So, okay. Really what's happening as we live our life is we generate reference points. Reference points of who our father is, who our mother is, where our bedroom is, where the kitchen is. All these reference points. And they're all in here. But what happens when you can't access those reference points? That the reference points don't connect you to where you are. Confusion and fear. So what we want to understand is that can we create an environment which supports reference points that someone with dementia can access? Can we guide them and provide them the use of our reference points? And again, it's an invitation. And by no means is it a demand. You cannot do that. But you can invite someone. So, we're going to discuss basically how you change an environment to eliminate the obstacles. And the three principles for that we focus on are simplifying, standardizing, using signage. There's a fourth principle, which is redirection. We'll talk about that later. But with respect to the environment, can you simplify it? What's the benefit? Can you standardize it? What's the benefit? What's the benefit of signage? If you go into some supermarket and you want a particular kind of mustard, and you get to the mustard area, you find it finally, and there's like 87 different bottles of mustard. And you sit there, which one is it? And you're going like this and like this. Finally you identify it and you can take it. But imagine if that's your experience of the world. When you look around, you see all these different things and you cannot isolate what it is that you want. To isolate something that you want, you have to hold in your mind what it is that you want. And you have to hold it while you look at something that's not what you want. So what we want to do is use simplification, standardization, and signage to act as cues and supports for someone with dementia. Okay, so if you do that, the environment will be simplified. And anything that you can do that makes it easier for your loved one is great. What you want to do is you want to create an environment, establish an environment where making a choice is simple. It's not complicated. It doesn't require a lot of evaluation, conceptualization, all of those things. So, if we can have the next slide. So you're in the kitchen, where's the coffee mug? You can't tell, but if this is your household, you know which cabinet it's in. Absolutely. But if you have dementia, you may not remember. And if you ever see any of those hidden camera videos dealing with this, you'll see people opening up every single cupboard, looking for something, and by the time they open the cupboard with whatever it is they're looking for, they've forgotten what it is they're looking for. It's incredibly frustrating. It's an awful experience. So, the next slide. Here's a cupboard. Okay, but you don't know what's in it. It's just, okay, there's a door. The next slide. This is someone's real cupboard, okay? These are real pictures. So if you look at this, there's a lot of things in there. So you have to isolate the one that you want amidst all of that perceptual noise. So go to the next one. Uh-oh, if you simplify it and you standardize it, you're looking for a coffee mug. There's no mistake that you're going to make. It's the same color, the same size, same shape, no issue. The processing power of your brain that you need to get that coffee mug is completely different. So if you want, we can go back to the other picture, like the optometrists, where they say, is this better or is this better? But hopefully we don't have to, but there it is. So this is an example of the two things of simplification and standardization. Okay? So I try to give real examples when I talk. So there is no distracting perceptual objects in there. So if you want a coffee mug and you open up this, you don't have to navigate. It's right there. Okay? So it's error-free, no mistake, no fear. Okay, so go to the next picture. Again, it's the bare cupboard door. And then the next. This is signage. This is the power of signage. All those cabinet doors look the same. But behind this cabinet door, here's the mug, there's the glass. Now with respect to this signage, there's two aspects. One is a picture. Picture's easily identifiable. Below it is the written word. People with dementia can read for a long time. And sometimes they can read long after they've lost the ability to understand what they're reading. But if you put this up, you're giving them both cues. Now you don't want to paste 47 pictures and words up here because you're just increasing the perceptual noise again, right? So simplification, standardization, signage. Okay, let's go to slide 10. Okay, this is a real silverware drawer. It's not like I made it up and threw everything in to make sure you could see what a real mess was. This is someone's real silverware drawer that I took a picture of. And the next slide. Very different. Do we need to do the back and forth like the optometrist? There you go. So you look at this, and one of the things that someone may have done all their life before they were diagnosed or before they had issues with dementia, they could go through that cluttered silverware drawer because it's theirs. They know where the forks are and they can move around, hunt around for things. But here you're making it very easy if you want them to help you set the table. Right? If it's just you and your loved one, you got 2 forks, 2 sets of chopsticks, 2 knives, 2 spoons. You can just take the tray out, there it is. The next step in something like this, as a task of dignity for your loved one to help set the table, you could, they have them online, and you could draw it yourself, but you can get a placemat and draw an outline of a fork, an outline of a knife, an outline of a spoon, outline of the plate, outline of the glass. So you're giving them a cue as to what you put where. You're giving them a task which is within their perceptual capacities that they can feel good about, and it's pretty much hard to make a mistake at that point. Okay, so the idea of the simplifying, the standardizing the environment, it eliminates many opportunities for confusion. So we've seen the pictures of the cups, we've seen the silverware drawer. You can do this throughout the environment. I don't want to put up 90 slides of different labels you could put on everything. But one of the things to understand, and the benefits go way beyond just these examples, why is doing this an expression of tremendous generosity based on love, based on affection? It's because we're giving up our own habits as caregivers. Your house is not going to look the same. Your silverware drawer is not going to look the same. Where you keep your coffee mugs is not going to look the same. Many things in the household are not going to look the same. So, as the caregiver, you're giving up your comfort zone about how your house should look or does look or whatever for a critically important thing, which is making your loved one feel safe, welcome, cared for. And again, every time you avoid a catastrophic explosion, your life is much easier, that much easier. Your loved one's life is that much easier. So, the idea is that you make the life smoother, you make it gentler, and there's more opportunity for the actual love and affection to suffuse the whole environment. Because if they're not fighting the environment, you're not fighting the environment. So let's go further. Most households, all the doors look the same. Like you walk down your hallway, there's maybe a door for a washroom, there's a door for one bedroom, another bedroom, the washing machine. All these doors look the same. If you've lived in that place for a long time, you know which door leads to what. But there's no cue on it except your memory. You can start placing pictures or labels on those doors. You can have a picture of the washing machine, if that's where the washing machine is. You can have a picture, and we'll talk about this, of a toilet on what we refer to as the washroom. I'll jump ahead just for a moment. Don't use the term "in my view." This is just my suggestion, okay? It's not written in law or anything. Don't call it a washroom. Don't label it a washroom. A washroom is an expression we use because we don't want to say toilet. Toilet has always had a quality, oh, this is dirty, right? Bodily waste. But if you ask someone with dementia, do you need to use the washroom? They may look at you and say, no, I'm fine. And they are. Their hands aren't dirty, there's no problem. They don't necessarily continue to make the connection between the word washroom and using a toilet. Write the word toilet, put a picture of a toilet on the door. We'll talk more about toileting later. Not that I have a issue with it, but it is an issue for caregiving that's very important to deal with. Okay, so labeling the door to the bedroom gives you a clear message to your loved one that this is where the bed is. Oh, don't show this yet. You do not have to identify it as something you're doing for your loved one because they need help. We need help. We just do it that way. It's very simple. Okay, so we've talked about polite euphemisms. Don't want to do those. Okay, so there's other things that we can do in the environment for safety, which I think are something that people should consider. And these are real issues that come up. Sometimes people leave a stove on. It's a fire hazard. It's a burn hazard. If you're used to turning on the stove, but because of your illness, you don't necessarily pay attention to it. You don't necessarily turn it off. You put on a pot to boil water, and all the water's been gone for an hour. What can you do with that? From a safety point of view, how do you prepare the environment so that your loved one can be in the kitchen safely? I usually don't make recommendations that cost very much money. This is one that I think is worthwhile that does cost a little bit of money. But have an electrician come in and put a switch that turns the electricity on and off to the oven and the stovetop away from the stove. You will remember where that is, and you can turn it on and off when you need to cook. But when you leave the kitchen, if you turn it off, you don't have to worry, will my loved one go in and hurt themselves? This is important. You can do it also with gas stoves. It's more expensive, but please have somebody who knows what they're doing do these things. This is not a DIY kind of approach. Some of the things are DIYs, but this is not. Another thing about the physical environment of our body is what we put in it. So we talked briefly about the journaling, that when you put liquid in a body in a pretty much a regular amount of time, something will want to come out. It's the same thing with food. So you keep that in the journal. So you know 45 minutes after lunch, they're going to need to use the toilet. This is so important with respect to keeping it in the journal. It will remind you so that you don't make an appointment at a doctor's office when you know your loved one is going to need to use the toilet. It is much easier to deal with toileting issues in the house than it is in a mall or in a doctor's office or anything like that. So it will enable you to maintain the information base you need to be as supportive and protective of your loved one throughout what they need to do and what you need to do in life. Okay, so, okay, here we go. On to the toilets. Okay, next slide. Okay, now you will notice this is a kind of a standard situation where you have a white toilet with a white seat with kind of off-white walls and an off-white floor. There's not a lot of cues in there, except in this case, the lid is up. So there's a cue there for where you sit down. If the lid is down, you don't even have that as a cue. Okay, what can we do about that? Next one. Here's a situation where you have a very contrasting color, which enables someone who has Alzheimer's to have a much clearer idea of where they sit for men that stand to urinate, where they're supposed to urinate. There's one other very important point to having contrasting color. As your perceptual capacities diminish, you don't necessarily know how far down you need to sit on a toilet. I think most people have had experience at least once in their life going too low and banging themselves. Or if the toilet seat is up, sitting down and falling and hurting themselves. This is a cue to avoid that. And particularly for women with osteoporosis, you do not want to invite hip fractures. So this gives a color code, which is offsetting to the white, which enables you to understand how low to go. Will it solve every problem? No, but it will solve some. Okay, the next slide. Okay, so here you have the blue seat with the lid up, and you have a bidet attachment, and they call them a washlet. You can go and get a bidet for, I think, $7,000 or $8,000, some of these very fancy ones. Or you can get this, which is $69.99 at Home Depot, that you can install yourself. Now, do you really want someone that you may or may not know or may not recognize fumbling around on your bottom in the washroom? People don't like that. Someone with dementia, if you can avoid that need, you will make getting them to use the toilet much easier. So here, this is set up as simply a cold water bidet. So you avoid the risk, you don't have multiple buttons to play with, and you avoid the risk of someone accidentally just putting very hot water in that area and burning themselves. So you can have them sit on the toilet, you can use the bidet, and they will get a lot cleaner than they would if you had to reach around and wipe their bottom yourself. Again, it's an opportunity to encourage their dignity, to make them feel safer in the washroom, and another reason to time anything you do outside of the house away from when they might need to use the toilet, because you're not going to find something like this in the mall. So again, this is actually something that even I, who was not a DIY person, was capable of doing in about 10 minutes. So it's not expensive, and it will be incredibly beneficial for your daily life. Okay, so the other thing, I don't know how many people do this, hopefully a lot of people do it, but putting night lights in the bedroom and night lights in the washroom, in the room where the toilet is very important. You want to encourage their visual capacity. You want them not to be stumbling around in the dark. You can get very easily light bulbs that are motion sensitive, or you can get a switch, which is a motion detector. The more light you have, the easier it is for them to see. Easier it is for you to see. So, okay, that's kind of the physical aspects of the environment. Okay? Does that make sense? We going okay? Running out of time. Okay, so communication. We'll go for the communication. Okay, when people don't feel safe, everything's experienced as a test. We have to learn to communicate in a simple, direct way. So how do we do that? Next. Okay, with children, this is what you do. Very simple, very basic Montessori. Next one. So, physical eye contact, physical contact, soft, calm voice. Avoid aggressive tones, sharp tones, soft body language. And you can redirect their attention. So, the idea basically is, how do you speak? If we change our habitual way of speaking, we can create an incredibly gentle, soft environment. So it's like the original picture I showed you of my mother and father. There was that much affection. He was not feeling like he was being tested. So you want to give them context, you want to give them cues, you want to meet them where they are. So, next. Okay, so this is a picture of my parents at the wedding of my younger sister. My mother, you can see, is so happy, and my father does not know what's going on, and he's very frightened. So immediately after that picture was taken, my father wanted to leave. I said, no problem. We got halfway to the car, and he stopped, and he started to walk back, and then back to the car. And he said, I think I'm making a mistake. And I said, no, everything's fine. And I looped his arm around mine, giving him a tactile sense that it was okay to walk. We walked to the car and we went home. Everything was fine. All you have to do is reassure someone and connect with warmth. And it's very easy to redirect them. Don't think about your experience, think about what their experience is. When you speak, very simple, subject, object, verb. Usually we talk the way I'm talking, with clause after clause after clause, circling around to here and there. Don't do that. Short, direct sentences. Yes, no questions. Don't say, do you want a muffin or an English, or do you want an English muffin or do you want a croissant? Don't do that. Because then they have to remember what an English muffin is, remember what a croissant is, remember which one they like. It's a lot of processing. Do you want an English muffin? Yes, no. Very easy. No mistake possible. If they say no, you say, okay, do you want a croissant? Keep things simple, something that they can access. So, at the end of the day, please note everything that happened that was positive, that was negative, things that happened over time. Remember to look into someone's eyes. Often when we talk and we tell stories, we're looking at you and then we're looking out the window and we're looking here and we hear a noise and we're still talking. And while we may all follow that, the person with dementia is getting a cue from you that something's over there, or something's over there, or something's over there. Don't give mistaken cues. Okay, one more. Okay, some people don't like to lie to the person that they love. They think it's a terrible thing. Someone who was using my materials went to see their mother in a facility, and their mother was in a panic. They were in panic because the door was left unlocked at home. The door she was referring to was the door in the house she had lived in for 40 or 50 years in New Jersey. She'd been living in California for 10 years. So this person immediately looked at her, took her hand, said, Mom, I know you left it unlocked. I took care of that on the way over here. And all of a sudden the panic attack stopped. So these are a few stories, a few whatevers. Go to the next slide. Don't challenge the capacities, meet them. Give them context, give them cues, give them safety. Don't go in I know people that would walk into their father or mother and say, do you remember who I am? You remember I came to visit you, do you remember who I am? Don't do that. What I would do with my father is I would say, hi Dad, it's Lyle, it's so good to see you again. You give him the relationship, you give him your name, and you let him know that he knows you because you've been here before. And you could see him relax. So these are the kinds of things we're talking about, creating a communication environment, creating a physical environment, creating an emotional environment. Give them your cues so that they can start using your reference points as theirs begin to dissolve. So I don't want to use up all the time. So we could do a question and answer. If you want to hear more stories, I can certainly tell more stories, but if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer whatever they are.
You can finish it with that. You have 5 minutes.
Go one more. This is pretty much what I summarized really quickly. Right? Simply, directly, short, declarative sentences. Isolate the difficulty, right? The picture of the cups in the cupboard. Isolate it. Restrict what you say to one point rather than circling and circling and circling and circling. Simple sentences, and ask questions with yes and no answers. There we go. So that's the outcome. Okay? Love is the tangible cue of safety for both of you. It really is. Affection. And if you can help someone live at home with less stress on themselves, less stress on the caregiver, the environment cueing them for safety, cueing them for love, and cueing them for connection, everyone's life will be easier. It will be more joyful. It actually can work. So that's what I have to say.